The void of Cathver had no stars. It had no planets. It had nothing that made sense to anyone who looked at it. For 40,000 years, the greatest minds of the Galactic Concord had studied it from a safe distance. They sent probes. The probes died. They sent ships with brave crews. The ships never came back. They sent entire fleets with the best technology in the galaxy. The fleets vanished like drops of water in a furnace after losing so many lives. The Concord did what wise civilizations do when they face something they cannot understand. They built a wall of warning beacons around it. They declared it forbidden. They told everyone to stay away. And slowly, over thousands of years, they tried to forget it existed. The void sat at the center of the galaxy, like a wound that would not heal. It was surrounded by gravitational storms that could tear apart the strongest ships. Time moved strangely near its borders. Some ships that approached too close aged 1,000 years in seconds. Others came back with crews who had not aged at all, while centuries passed outside. The energy fields around it burned with colors that had no names in any language. The elder races of the Concord believed the void was a remnant of the architects. These were the beings who had supposedly created all life in the galaxy billions of years ago. No one had ever seen an architect. No one knew what they looked like or where they went. But every ancient text, every old legend, every piece of strange technology that could not be explained was blamed on them. The architects had become the answer to every question that had no answer. And the void of Cathver was their greatest mystery. Ambassador Vethrol was old even by the standards of his species, the Cathmori. His kind lived for thousands of years, and he had spent most of his life serving the Concord. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched young species discover space travel and old species fade into extinction. Nothing surprised him anymore, until a morning when a distress beacon appeared on his screen. He was sitting in his office on Concord Station Prime, reviewing the usual boring reports about trade disputes and border conflicts. The beacon alert cut through everything else. It was coming from inside the void of Cathver. Vethrol stared at the screen for a long time. His 4 eyes blinked slowly, one pair after the other. This had to be a mistake. The beacon codes identified the ship as the Wandering Meridian, a human exploration vessel that had disappeared 3 years ago. The humans had reported it lost during a routine survey mission. Everyone assumed the crew was dead, but here was their signal, coming from a place where no signal should exist. Vethrol called for his aide. "Verify this beacon," he said. "Check it 3 times. Check it 10 times. There must be an error." There was no error. The beacon was real, and it was moving. The Wandering Meridian was not just alive inside the void. It was coming out. The news spread through the Concord like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every major species knew what was happening. The reactions ranged from disbelief to panic to careful interest. The elder races were the most disturbed. They had built their entire understanding of the universe around the idea that the void was impossible to survive. If a human ship had done it, everything they believed was wrong. The Concord assembled a fleet to intercept the emerging vessel. 12 heavy cruisers from 6 different species gathered at the border of the Forbidden Zone. They were armed with the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, not because they expected to fight the humans, but because they were afraid of what might be coming out with them. Vethrol watched from the command ship as the Wandering Meridian emerged. From the chaos, the human vessel was small compared to the Concord cruisers. It was designed for exploration, not war. Its hull was covered with strange marks that made no sense. There were burn patterns that spiraled inward instead of outward, as if the fire had pulled toward the ship instead of pushing away from it. There were scratches and dents that seemed to move when you looked at them directly. And on the front of the ship, glowing with soft light, was a symbol that made Vethrol's blood run cold. It was the sigil of the architects. The same symbol that appeared in ancient temples and on artifacts that were billions of years old. A mark that no living being had ever been able to reproduce. "All ships, hold position," Vethrol commanded. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Do not fire unless fired upon. Open a communication channel." The channel opened with a crackle of static. Then a human voice came through, calm and clear. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Wandering Meridian. We have returned from the void of Kethvor. We request permission to approach and dock at the nearest station." Vethrol found that he had forgotten how to speak. The captain of one of his cruisers, a Vormkai warrior named Thesk, broke the silence. "Human vessel, you will hold position and prepare for boarding. You will answer our questions. You will explain how you survived the Forbidden Zone." There was a pause. When Vasquez spoke again, there was something in her voice that Vethrol could not identify. It might have been amusement. It might have been pity. "We found what you've been hiding from yourselves." The words hung in the silence. Before anyone could respond, the external cameras focused on the ship's hull. The sigil of the architects pulsed with light, and every sensor on every ship went blank for exactly 1 second. When the sensors came back online, nothing had changed. But every member of every crew knew that something had just happened. Something had just looked at them. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in the command chair of her battered ship and waited. She was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. 3 years inside the void had changed her. It had changed all of them. The 47 crew members who had survived were not the same people who had left Earth's colony on New Valencia so long ago. She remembered the day they fell into the wormhole. And it appeared out of nowhere during a routine scan of an asteroid field. One moment they were mapping rocks, the next moment they were somewhere else. Somewhere impossible. The void of Kethvor had tried to kill them from the first second. The laws of physics that Vasquez had learned in school did not work there. Gravity pulled in directions that should not exist. Light bent in ways that hurt to look at. Time moved differently from one room to another on the ship. The engine room might experience hours, while the bridge experienced days. Any other species would have died. The elder races of the Concord had certainly died, over and over again, for 40,000 years. But humans were different. Humans were too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Vasquez had gathered her crew together on that first day and told them the truth. "We're in a place that shouldn't exist," she said. "Our instruments don't work. Our maps are useless. Everything we know about space travel is wrong here. But we're still alive. And as long as we're alive, we can figure this out." They had figured it out, slowly, painfully, with countless mistakes and near deaths and moments of pure terror. They rewired the ship hundreds of times, trying different configurations until something worked. They invented new ways to navigate, based on intuition and guesswork instead of mathematics. They learned to trust their instincts even when their instruments said they were wrong. And somewhere in the middle of all that struggle, they met the Whisper. Vasquez did not like to think about the Whisper. It was too big, too strange, too far beyond her understanding. It was not a creature in any normal sense. It was more like a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. It spoke in feelings and images more than words. And it had chosen them. Why? Vasquez still did not know. The Whisper had watched them struggle through the void for almost a year before making contact. When it finally spoke to her, its first words were, "You do not give up. This is unusual. This is interesting." The Whisper had helped them after that, not by making things easy, but by giving them hints. A suggestion to turn left instead of right. A warning about a gravitational anomaly ahead. Small things that added up to survival. In exchange, it had asked them questions. Endless questions about humanity, about Earth, about what it felt like to be mortal and fragile and still keep trying. Vasquez had answered as honestly as she could. She told the Whisper about human history, about their wars and their art and their endless curiosity. She told it about how humans had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times, but always pulled back from the edge. She told it about love and fear and hope, and all the messy emotions that drove her species forward. The Whisper had listened, and at the end, it had given them a gift. "You will carry a message," it said. "The galaxy needs to know what is coming. You are the ones who will tell them." Vasquez had not wanted to be a messenger. She had wanted to go home, see her family again, sleep in a real bed, and forget that the void existed. But she could not refuse. The Whisper had shown her what was coming. The darkness at the edge of the galaxy. The thing that had made even the architects run and hide. 50 years. That was how long they had. Maybe less. Now she was back in normal space, surrounded by alien warships that were pointing enough weapons at her to destroy a small moon. And she had to make them understand. She had to make them listen. It was going to be the hardest thing she had ever done. The Concorde ships escorted the wandering Meridian to a holding station near the border of the Forbidden Zone. They would not let the human vessel come any closer to populated space. Vethral arranged for a secure communication channel so he could question the captain directly. "You will explain how you survived," he said. It was not a request. Vasquez's face appeared on his screen. She looked older than her service record indicated. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of stress and exhaustion. But her gaze was steady. "We adapted," she said. "That's what humans do. You build your ships to master the universe. We build ours to survive it." Vethral did not understand. The void destroys everything. Our best ships with our best technology could not last more than a few hours inside. "You are telling me that a small exploration vessel with basic equipment survived for 3 years? I'm telling you that the rules are different in there. Your technology is too rigid. It tries to force the universe to obey it. When the universe doesn't obey, the technology breaks. We didn't have that problem because our technology was already held together with luck and hope and desperate repairs." The other Concorde representatives listening to the conversation made sounds of disbelief. The idea that primitive human technology was better than their advanced systems was absurd. It had to be a lie. But Vethral looked at the sigil on the wandering Meridian's hull, and he was not so sure. "What did you find in there?" he asked. "What is that symbol on your ship?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment. "We found the reason you're all so afraid to look. We found the answer to the question you stopped asking 40,000 years ago." "Which question?" "Where did the architects go? And why did they leave?" The channel filled with voices. Every representative wanted to speak. Every representative wanted to know. Vethral raised his hand for silence, but it took a long time for the noise to die down. "Tell us," he said finally. Vasquez shook her head. "Not like this. Not over a communication channel while your ships point weapons at us. If you want to know the truth, you need to bring us before your leaders. All of them. Every species that matters. We have a message that everyone needs to hear." "What kind of message?" For the first time, Vasquez smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something terrible and wished they did not. "A warning," she said. "You have about 50 years to prepare. After that, nothing I say will matter because there won't be anyone left to hear it." The channel went silent. Vethral stared at the human woman on his screen and felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt afraid. The Concorde had stood for over 100,000 years. It had survived wars, plagues, and disasters that killed billions. It had grown from a handful of species to over 400, spreading across the galaxy like a living thing. But looking at the human captain with her tired eyes and her terrible knowledge, Vethral suddenly understood that everything he knew, everything he had built his life upon, was about to change. The wandering meridian hung in space, battered and scarred but unbroken. The sigil on its hull continued to glow with soft light. And somewhere deep inside the ship's systems, something ancient waited. The whisper had made its choice. The message would be delivered. The galaxy would learn the truth, whether it wanted to or not. Concord Station Prime was the largest artificial structure in the galaxy. It floated in the empty space between 3 star systems, far from any planet or sun. Its builders had chosen this location carefully. They wanted the station to belong to everyone and no one. They wanted it to be neutral ground where the 400 species of the Concord could meet and talk and solve their problems without fighting. The station was old. It had been built over 60,000 years ago, and it had been expanded and modified so many times that no one remembered what the original structure looked like. Now it stretched across hundreds of kilometers. A maze of docking bays and meeting halls and living quarters, designed for creatures of every possible shape and size. Captain Elena Vasquez had never seen anything like it. She stood at the window of her holding cell and stared at the endless metal corridors outside. The cell was comfortable enough. It had a bed, a table, food that was safe for humans to eat. But it was still a cell. The door was locked, and guards stood outside. The Concord had agreed to hear her message, but they did not trust her. They had separated her crew into different sections of the station. They had taken the wandering meridian to a secure dock where teams of scientists were studying every inch of it. And they had made it very clear that the humans were not guests. They were prisoners who happened to have useful information. Vasquez understood. She would have done the same thing in their position. A ship comes out of an impossible place carrying the symbol of a god race that disappeared billions of years ago. Of course, they were suspicious. Of course, they were afraid. She just hoped they were afraid enough to listen. The door to her cell opened. Ambassador Vethral walked in, followed by 2 guards who were clearly nervous about being so close to a human. Vasquez almost laughed at that. She was one woman in a cell. They had warships that could destroy planets. But they were scared of her. The High Tribunal has agreed to hear you, Vethral said. Tomorrow, you will stand before representatives of every major species in the Concord. You will explain what happened in the void. You will tell them everything. And if I refuse? Vethral's 4 eyes blinked slowly. That would be unwise. There are many who believe you should be executed as a precaution. They think you might be contaminated by whatever is in the Forbidden Zone. They think you might be a threat. I am a threat, Vasquez said quietly. Just not in the way they think. She turned from the window and looked directly at the ambassador. He was tall and thin, covered in gray scales that shifted color slightly depending on his mood. Right now they were a dark blue that she suspected meant worry. Your people have been studying my ship, she said. What have they found? The technology is unusual. Your engineers made modifications that should not work. They connected systems in ways that defy our understanding. The ship should have torn itself apart 100 times over. But it didn't. No, it didn't. Vethral paused. They also found the recordings. 3 years of sensor data, crew logs, personal journals. Everything your ship experienced in the void. Vasquez felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Did they watch them? Some of them? The senior scientists. Most of them have requested mental health support afterward. The ambassador's scales shifted to a lighter shade. One of them has not spoken since viewing your chief engineer's final log entry. Vasquez closed her eyes. She knew which log he meant. The day they had finally made contact with the Whisper. The day their lives had changed forever. "The recordings will help them understand," she said. "But they won't be enough. The tribunal needs to hear it from me. They need to see what we became. What did you become?" Vasquez opened her eyes. For a moment, just a brief flash, something else looked out through them. Something older and stranger than any human should contain. Then it was gone, and she was just a tired captain again. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'll explain everything tomorrow." The High Tribunal met in the Chamber of Voices, a vast amphitheater at the heart of Concord Station Prime. The chamber was designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species at once. The seats curved upward in great circles, rising toward a ceiling that showed a live image of the stars outside. The acoustics were perfect. A whisper at the center of the room could be heard clearly in the highest seat. Elena Vasquez stood at that center, surrounded by more aliens than she had ever seen in one place. They came in every shape imaginable. Some were tall and thin like Vethral. Some were short and round. Some floated in special chambers filled with gas or liquid. Some had no visible body at all and appeared only as patterns of light. The elder races sat in the front rows. These were the species that had been traveling between stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. They looked at Vasquez with expressions that ranged from curiosity to contempt. To them, humans were children. Interesting children, perhaps, but still far too young to be taken seriously. Behind them sat the younger races, species that had joined the Concord in the last few million years. Many of them watched Vasquez with more open interest. The humans were newcomers like themselves. They understood what it felt like to be dismissed by the ancient powers at the very top of the chamber. In seats of honor that overlooked everything sat the Elder Council. 7 beings who were so old that their exact ages were unknown. They had been guiding the Concord for longer than most species could count. Their word was law. The eldest of them all was Mornthex of the Synthesis. No one knew what the Synthesis looked like in their natural form, because they had abandoned physical bodies millions of years ago. Mornthex appeared as a shimmering cloud of energy, constantly shifting between colors and shapes. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once. "Human," the entity said, "you have been brought before this tribunal to answer for your intrusion into the Forbidden Zone. You claim to have survived the void of Kethvar. You claim to carry a message. We will hear what you have to say. But understand this. If we find that you have lied, if we find that you have deceived us, the punishment will be severe." Vasquez nodded. She had expected threats. She was not afraid. "I understand," she said, "and I will tell you everything. But first, I need you to understand something. I am not here to make you happy. I am not here to comfort you or tell you what you want to hear. I am here to deliver a warning that you have been avoiding for 40,000 years." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Many of the elder races were not used to being spoken to this way by a human. Mornthex raised a tendril of energy, and the noise died down. "Speak," the ancient being said. "We are listening." Vasquez took a deep breath and began. 3 years ago, my ship was caught in an uncharted wormhole. We were pulled into the void of Kethvar without warning. There was no time to send a distress signal. No time to do anything except hold on and pray. She described the first moments in the void, the way reality had twisted around them, the way their instruments had screamed errors before going dead, the way the stars had disappeared and left them floating in absolute darkness. "We should have died," she said. "Every piece of data you have about the Forbidden Zone says that survival is impossible. And for the first few days, we almost proved that data right. We lost 3 crew members in the first week. The ship was falling apart. Our food supplies were contaminated by some kind of energy that made them poisonous. We had no idea where we were or how to get back. She paused. The chamber was silent now. Even the most arrogant representatives were listening. But we didn't give up. Humans don't know how to give up. It's not in our nature. When everything went wrong, we started trying things. Random things. Stupid things. We rewired our engines based on dreams one of our engineers had. We navigated by the headaches our doctor was getting. We used a child's toy to detect gravitational anomalies because it was the only thing on the ship that still worked. A ripple of disbelief went through the audience. One of the elder representatives, a creature that looked like a walking crystal, spoke up. You expect us to believe that you survived the most dangerous place in the galaxy through luck and guesswork? I expect you to believe the truth, Vasquez said. Your technology failed in the void because it was too rigid. You built your ships to control the universe, to force it to obey your rules. But the void doesn't have rules. It's chaos. Pure, impossible chaos. And the only way to survive chaos is to be flexible enough to change with it. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could. We changed. Every day, we changed. We threw out everything we thought we knew and started over. We made mistakes and learned from them. We tried 1,000 things that didn't work until we found one thing that did. And slowly, over months and years, we learned how to live in a place that was designed to kill us. Designed? Morenthek's voice was sharp. What do you mean, designed? Vasquez felt the moment arrive. This was the part she had been dreading. The void of Kethver is not a natural phenomenon, she said. It was built, constructed, created on purpose by the architects themselves. The chamber exploded. This time, even Morenthek could not silence the crowd. Representatives were shouting, arguing, some of them trying to leave. The idea that the architects had deliberately created the Forbidden Zone went against everything the Concord believed. Vasquez waited. She had expected this reaction. When the noise finally died down, she continued. It was a test, she said. A filter. The architects knew that someday something terrible would threaten the galaxy. They needed to find a species that could face that threat. But they couldn't just pick one. They had to find the right one. The one that was stubborn enough, creative enough, crazy enough to do the impossible. She spread her hands. In 40,000 years, you sent thousands of expeditions into the void. The best ships from the greatest civilizations. The most advanced technology in the galaxy. And every single one of them failed. Do you know why? Silence. Because they were too good, Vasquez said. Too logical. Too sensible. When their technology didn't work, they gave up. When the rules of reality changed, they couldn't change with them. They died because they couldn't imagine any way forward except the one they already knew. She pointed at herself. Humans pass the test because we're not good. We're messy and chaotic, and we make terrible decisions. We flew into a storm of impossible physics with a ship held together by tape and hope. And when everything went wrong, we just kept trying. Not because we were brave, because we didn't know how to stop. The chamber was quiet now. The representatives were staring at her with a mixture of emotions she couldn't read. The architects wanted to find a species that would never give up, she said. A species that would keep fighting even when the situation was hopeless. A species that was too young and too stupid to know when it was beaten. She smiled bitterly. Congratulations. You found us. The questions came fast after that. Representatives wanted to know every detail. How had they navigated? What had they eaten? How had they maintained the ship? Vasquez answered as best she could, but she knew that her explanations didn't make sense to them. They couldn't understand because they had never experienced it. Finally, Elder Counselor Morenthek asked the question everyone was waiting for. You said you carry a message. You speak of a test designed by the architects. But you have not explained the most important thing. What is in the void? What did you find there? Vasquez hesitated. This was the moment she had been both waiting for and dreading. We found one of them, she said quietly. One of the architects. Or what's left of one. The silence that followed was absolute. It called itself the Whisper. It's not a creature like you or me. It's something else. Something older than the stars. It watched us struggle through the void for almost a year before it made contact. And when it finally spoke to us, it explained everything. She looked up at the Elder Council. The architects didn't disappear. They retreated. They built the void as a barrier, a wall to protect the galaxy from something on the other side. And then they hid, because even they were afraid of what was coming. What is coming? Mornthek's voice was barely above a whisper. Before Vasquez could answer, something changed. The lights in the chamber flickered. The artificial gravity wavered for a moment. And then a voice spoke, coming from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and vast and utterly inhuman. They did not find me. I chose them. And now I will speak. Every screen in the chamber lit up with the same image. The sigil of the architects, glowing with soft golden light. The voice continued, and Vasquez felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard the whisper many times in the void, but it had never sounded like this. It had never sounded so present. Children of the galaxy, the whisper said, you have hidden from the truth for 40,000 years. You have pretended that the void was a mystery beyond your understanding. You have told yourselves that some questions should not be asked. But the time for hiding is over. The time for truth has arrived. The Elder Council was frozen in place. Even Mornthex, who had existed for millions of years, seemed paralyzed. I am the last memory of those who built you, the whisper said. I have waited in the darkness for longer than your civilizations have existed. I have watched your ships burn and your people die, and I have mourned each loss. But I could not help you. Not until someone came who was worthy of receiving the message. The image on the screens changed. It showed a darkness at the edge of the galaxy. Stars disappearing one by one, swallowed by something that moved against the light. This is what is coming, the whisper said. This is what made even the architects afraid. You have 50 years, perhaps less, and you have one chance to survive. The voice paused, and when it spoke again, it was softer, almost gentle. The humans are your hope, not because they are stronger or smarter or better than you, because they are willing to try when trying seems useless, because they do not know how to give up. Listen to them, learn from them, and perhaps together you will find a way to live. The lights stopped flickering. The gravity stabilized. The screens went dark. And in the chamber of voices, 400 species sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had just happened. Elena Vasquez stood at the center of it all, tired and small and very, very human. Now you know, she said quietly. Now you know everything. She didn't wait for permission to leave. She simply turned and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop her. No one said a word. The message had been delivered. Now the hard part would begin. The chamber of voices remained silent for 17 minutes after Elena Vasquez left. No one moved. No one spoke. 400 species sat in their seats and tried to process what they had just witnessed that an architect had spoken to them. A being from the race that created all life in the galaxy. A god from before time had meaning. And it had told them they were all going to die unless they listened to the humans. The humans. The youngest species in the Concord. The ones who had been in space for barely 200 years. The ones that the elder races treated like curious children who had wandered into an adult conversation. Elder Council M1Thex was the first to move. The shimmering cloud of energy that made up its body flickered through 100 colors in rapid succession. This was the equivalent of a human having a panic attack. M1Thex had existed for over 50 million years. It had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. It had watched stars being born and dying. Nothing had ever frightened it before. It was frightened now. "Clear the chamber," M1Thex commanded. "The Elder Council will meet in private session. All other representatives are dismissed." There were protests, of course. The younger races wanted to know more. The elder races wanted to deny what they had seen. But the guards were already moving, gently but firmly guiding everyone toward the exits. Within an hour, only the 7 members of the Elder Council remained. They gathered in a smaller room behind the main chamber. It was designed for private conversations, with walls that blocked every known form of surveillance. They sat around a circular table made of material that was older than most stars. "This cannot be real," said Thesrak the Undying, a being that had once been organic, but had transferred its consciousness into a mechanical body billions of years ago. "The architects are myths. Stories we tell to explain things we don't understand. They are not real." "The symbol on the human ship was real," replied Vathmara, the representative of the Keth Mori and a distant relative of Ambassador Vethral. "Our scientists have confirmed it. The sigil matches every ancient artifact we have ever found. It is authentic." "Perhaps the humans found an artifact somewhere incompetent," suggested Halkarine of the Assembly, a collective consciousness that existed across thousands of bodies. "Perhaps they are deceiving us. For what purpose?" asked M1Thex. "What would they gain by pretending to have met an architect? They are the youngest and weakest species in the Concord. If they wanted power, there are easier ways to get it." The council fell silent. They all knew that M1Thex was right. The humans had nothing to gain from this deception. And the voice that had spoken in the chamber, it had felt real. It had felt old. It had felt old. It had felt like something that existed before the universe had rules. "We need to question the crew again," said Luminara of the Lightweavers, a species that existed partially in dimensions that other races could not perceive. "The captain told us what happened, but there are 46 other survivors. We need to hear their stories." "Agreed," said M1Thex. "But we must be careful. If the Whisper truly exists, if it truly chose the humans to carry its message, then they may be more dangerous than they appear. We cannot risk harming them or angering whatever power protects them." The council spent hours debating. They reviewed the recordings from the Wandering Meridian. They studied the strange modifications that the human engineers had made to their ship. They analyzed every word that Captain Vasquez had spoken. By the end, they were no closer to understanding what had happened. But they all agreed on one thing. The humans were telling the truth. Something impossible had occurred. Something that changed everything they knew about the universe. And something terrible was coming. In her temporary quarters on Concord Station Prime, Elena Vasquez sat with her crew and waited. They had been reunited after the tribunal, allowed to share a common space while the Concord decided what to do with them. It was better than being separate cells, but it was still not freedom. Her chief engineer, Marcus Webb, was sleeping in a corner. He had pushed himself too hard during their years in the void and had never fully recovered. His hair had turned white during the journey, even though he was only 34 years old. Sometimes he spoke in his sleep, muttering equations that didn't exist in any textbook. Her doctor, Priya Sharma, was examining the other crew members one by one. She was checking for signs of the changes that had been happening to all of them since they met the Whisper. Small things at first. Dreams that seemed to predict the future. Feelings of knowing things they shouldn't know. A sense of connection to something vast and ancient that lurked at the edge of their minds. Lieutenant. Commander James Rodriguez sat next to Vasquez, his eyes fixed on the door. "They're scared of us," he said quietly. "The guards, the representatives, even the Elder Council. They look at us like we're carrying a disease." "We are carrying something," Vasquez replied. "Just not a disease." Rodriguez turned to look at her. He had been her second in command since the beginning. He had stood beside her through every impossible moment in the void. He trusted her with his life. But lately, even he was starting to wonder what was happening to them. "Captain," he said slowly, "do you know what the Whisper did to us?" Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. She had been avoiding this conversation. She had been hoping that if she didn't talk about it, it wouldn't be real. "It gave us pieces of itself," she finally said. "Knowledge, understanding, the ability to perceive things that we shouldn't be able to perceive. It's not complete. It's like having a word on the tip of your tongue that you can't quite remember. We know things, but we don't always know what we know." "Is that why I've been dreaming about the darkness?" Rodriguez asked. "The thing at the edge of the galaxy?" "Yes, and the things I see when I close my eyes? The structures and the equations and the patterns that don't make any sense. Those are real, James. They're pieces of technology that the architects used. The Whisper put them in our heads so we could share them when the time was right." Rodriguez let out a long breath. "So we're not just messengers. We're what? Storage devices? Living archives?" "Something like that." Vasquez managed a tired smile. "I'm sorry. I should have explained earlier. But I wasn't sure you would believe me. Captain, I flew through the void for 3 years. I watched space fold in on itself. I had a conversation with a being older than the stars. At this point, I'll believe anything." The door opened before Vasquez could respond. Ambassador Vethral entered, followed by 2 guards. His gray scales were shifting through shades of blue and green, which Vasquez had learned meant he was feeling a complicated mix of emotions. "The Elder Council has made a decision," he said. "They want to speak with the Whisper again. They have questions that only it can answer." Vasquez stood up. "That's not how it works. The Whisper doesn't take orders. It speaks when it chooses to speak. Then perhaps you can ask it on our behalf. I can try, but I can't promise anything. The Whisper is not our pet. It's not our servant. It chose to help us, but that doesn't mean it will do what we want." Vethral's scales flickered. "Then what does it want?" Vasquez thought about the question. She had asked the Whisper the same thing many times during their journey through the void. The answer had never been simple. "It wants us to survive," she said finally. "All of us. Every species in the galaxy. It watched the architects build everything we have, and it loved what they created. When they left, when they hid from the darkness, the Whisper stayed behind to guard their legacy. It's been waiting for 40,000 years for someone to carry on their work. And it chose humans for this task? It didn't choose us because we were the best. It chose us because we were willing." Vethral seemed to consider this. "The Council has prepared a list of questions. Matters of technology, defense, the nature of the threat we face. If the Whisper truly wants us to survive, surely it will answer these questions. Maybe. Or maybe it will decide that giving us the answers would be too easy. The Whisper believes in struggle. It believes that growth comes from overcoming obstacles, not avoiding them. If we want its help, we have to earn it. How?" Vasquez looked at the ambassador steadily. "By proving that we deserve it. By showing that we're willing to change, to adapt, to become something more than we are. The architects faced the darkness and failed. The Whisper thinks that maybe, if all the species of the galaxy work together, we might find a way to succeed where they couldn't." "That seems like a great deal of faith to place in uncertain hopes." "That's all faith ever is," Vasquez replied. believing in something without knowing for sure. The Whisper has faith in us. The question is whether you can have faith too. The council's questions were presented to the crew of the Wandering Meridian. Vasquez gathered her people together and explained what was needed. Then they did something that made the watching guards very uncomfortable. They held hands and closed their eyes. In the weeks since leaving the void, the crew had discovered that they could do things together that they couldn't do alone. When they focused their minds in the same direction, they could sometimes reach the Whisper. It was like trying to catch a dream. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. This time, it worked. The room grew cold. The lights flickered. And then the Whisper spoke, not through any machine or screen, but directly into the minds of everyone present. You have questions. Ambassador Vethral nearly fell over. He had been observing from a safe distance, and he was not prepared for the voice in his head. The guards had similar reactions. Only the human crew remained calm. "We need to know about the threat," Vasquez said out loud. "What is coming? Where does it come from? How can we fight it?" There was a pause. When the Whisper answered, its voice carried the weight of billions of years of memory. The architects called it the Absence. It is not a creature or a fleet or an army. It is a void, a hunger, a nothing that consumes everything. It came from beyond the edge of the universe, from a place where existence itself is different. It spreads like a disease, eating stars and planets and everything that lives. Nothing the architects built could stop it. Nothing they tried could even slow it down. Then how did they survive? Vethral asked, finding his voice. They did not survive. They fled. They created barriers and walls and traps to slow the Absence down. They gave their lives to buy time. And in the end, the few who remained retreated into dimensions that the Absence could not reach. They are still there, sleeping, waiting, hoping that someone will find a way to end the threat forever. "You said we have 50 years, Vasquez said. "How do you know?" "I can feel it approaching. The Absence moves slowly, but it never stops. It has been traveling toward this galaxy since before your species existed. It will arrive, and when it does, everything you have built will be destroyed." The room was very quiet. "Is there any hope?" Dr. Sharma asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Is there anything we can do?" "There is always hope. That is the first lesson the architects learned. Even when everything seems lost, even when defeat is certain, there is always hope. The universe is vast and full of possibilities. The architects believed that somewhere, somehow, there was a way to stop the Absence. They never found it. But they also never stopped believing it existed. "And you think we can find it?" Rodriguez asked. "A bunch of humans who can barely travel between stars? Not you alone. All of you. Every species in this galaxy." The architects were powerful, but they were also alone. They did not trust others with their knowledge. They did not ask for help. They tried to face the darkness by themselves, and they failed. Perhaps if you work together, you will succeed where they could not. There was a long silence. Then Vasquez asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the beginning. "Why us? Why did you choose humans to carry this message?" The answer came with something that might have been amusement. "Because you never stopped trying. In the void, your technology failed. Your knowledge failed. Your plans failed. But you did not fail. You kept trying new things, kept making mistakes, kept learning. The elder races of the Concord have forgotten how to fail. They have become so wise that they can no longer grow. You are young enough to still believe in the impossible. That is your greatest strength." The voice began to fade. "There is more that I can teach you. Knowledge that the architects gathered over billions of years. But I cannot simply give it to you. You must earn it by proving that you are ready to receive it. The humans have taken the first step. Now the rest of the galaxy must follow. And then the presence was gone. The room warmed. The lights stopped flickering. The guards stared at the human crew with expressions of pure confusion. Vasquez opened her eyes and let go of the hand she had been holding. "Well," she said quietly, "now they know." The Elder Council received the Whisper's message with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Some of them wanted to dismiss it as a trick or a delusion, but they had all felt the presence in the room. They had all heard the ancient voice in their minds. They knew, whether they wanted to admit it or not, that it was real. Over the next several days, the council debated what to do. Some argued for immediate action. Build new weapons. Strengthen defenses. Prepare for war. Others argued for caution. Learn more about the threat before committing resources. Study the enemy before fighting it. The humans were kept comfortable but confined. They were not trusted, not yet. But they were no longer treated as prisoners. They were treated as something new, something that no one had a category for. Morinthex came to speak with Vasquez privately on the 5th day, the ancient being manifested in her quarters as a gentle glow of light, careful not to disturb the crew members who were resting. "I have existed for 50 million years, Morinthex said. I remember when your son was young. I remember when your planet was a ball of molten rock with no life at all. In all that time, I have never felt what I felt when the Whisper spoke. What did you feel?" Vasquez asked. "Small," the entity replied. "For the first time in millions of years, I felt truly small. The architects created everything I know. My species, my civilization, the stars themselves. And they were destroyed by something even more powerful. What hope do any of us have against such a force?" Vasquez sat down on the edge of her bed and looked at the glowing cloud that was Morinthex. "Can I tell you a story?" she asked. The entity pulsed with curiosity. "Please." "When I was a little girl, my family lived on a colony world called New Valencia. It was a beautiful place. Farms and forests and wide open skies. But it was also dangerous. The local wildlife included creatures called storm wolves. They were pack hunters, fast and deadly. When they came for the livestock, there was nothing the farmers could do. The wolves always won." She paused, remembering. One year, the wolves got worse. They weren't just taking livestock anymore. They were attacking people. The colony council decided to evacuate. They said it was too dangerous to stay. Most people agreed, but not everyone? No, there was an old farmer named Miguel Santos. He had lived on that world for 40 years. He said he wasn't going to let some animals drive him from his home. Everyone told him he was crazy. Everyone told him he would die. But he stayed anyway. What happened? Vasquez smiled. He died, actually. 6 months later. The wolves got him in the end. But here's the thing. Before he died, he figured out how to fight them. He studied their patterns, found their weaknesses, developed techniques to drive them away. He wrote everything down and sent it to the colony council. She looked up at Morinthex. A year later, the colonists came back. They used Miguel's techniques. They fought the wolves and won. New Valencia is still there today, full of farms and families and children who never have to be afraid. Miguel Santos saved them. Not by winning, but by trying. The ancient entity was quiet for a long moment. "You are telling me that failure is acceptable as long as we learn from it. I'm telling you that trying is always worth it, even if you don't succeed. The architects failed, but they left behind knowledge and warnings and protectors like the Whisper. We have 50 years to build on what they started. Maybe we'll fail too. Maybe the absence will destroy everything. But if we don't try, we've already lost." Morinthex's S-light pulsed through a spectrum of colors that Vasquez had never seen before. "You are a very unusual species," the entity said finally. "I begin to understand why the Whisper chose you. Does that mean the Council will help us?" "It means I will argue on your behalf. The decision is not mine alone. But I believe that the galaxy must stand together or fall apart. And if standing together means following the lead of a species that has only been traveling between stars for 200 years. The entity paused. "Then that is what we must do." Vasquez felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was not victory. It was not even hope. But it was a start. It was always enough just to start. The Concorde did not break all at once. It cracked slowly, like ice on a frozen lake when spring begins. The first cracks appeared within days of the Whisper's revelation. By the end of the first month, whole sections of the Galactic government were threatening to collapse. The problem was belief. Some species believed everything the Whisper had said. They wanted to act immediately, to begin preparations for the coming darkness. Others refused to accept that an ancient voice from the Forbidden Zone could be trusted. They demanded proof. They demanded evidence. They demanded anything that would let them return to the comfortable certainty they had known before dawn. And then there were those who believed the Whisper but blamed the humans for bringing its message. These were the most dangerous of all. The Orthodoxy was the first formal faction to emerge. It was led by the elder races, the species that had been traveling between stars for millions of years. They had built their entire identity around being the galaxy's wisest and most advanced civilizations. The idea that primitive humans had succeeded where they failed was impossible to accept. "The humans have been corrupted," declared High Priest Varektina of the Eternal Light, speaking to a gathering of Orthodoxy supporters. "The thing they call the Whisper is not an architect. It is a demon, a trap. It has poisoned their minds, and now it seeks to poison ours. We must destroy the human ship, execute the crew, and seal the Forbidden Zone forever." His words found eager listeners. Many species had never liked the humans. They were too loud, too emotional, too unpredictable. Their sudden rise to importance felt wrong. It felt unearned. Surely there had to be a trick, a deception, some explanation that put things back in their proper order. The pragmatists formed in response. This faction believed that the threat was real and that preparations had to begin immediately. They did not care about wounded pride or ancient hierarchies. They cared about survival. "We have 50 years, said Admiral Vethral, who had emerged as one of the pragmatist leaders. He had spent weeks reviewing the evidence and had concluded that the humans were telling the truth. 50 years to understand a threat that destroyed the architects themselves. We cannot afford to waste time on politics and pride. We must work together, or we will die apart." The third faction called themselves the Ascendants. They were made up of younger species who had long been treated as second-class members of the Concorde. For them, the Whisper's choice of humans was not a disaster. It was liberation. "The elder races have kept us down for too long," said Speaker Myris of the Collective, addressing a gathering of Ascendant supporters. "They told us we were too young, too primitive, too unworthy to share in their knowledge. Now we know the truth. They are not wise. They are simply old. And the universe has chosen new champions." The Ascendants rallied around humanity, hoping to ride their rise to power. Some genuinely believed in the human mission. Others simply saw an opportunity. Elena Vasquez watched all of this from her position at the center of the storm. The Concorde had finally released her crew from confinement, but freedom came with complications. She could not walk through a corridor without being stopped by supporters or protesters or simply curious beings who wanted to see the humans who had met an architect. Her crew was changing in ways that worried her. The gifts that the Whisper had left in their minds were growing stronger. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb could look at alien technology and understand it instantly without studying or training. Dr. Priya Sharma could sense illness in living beings from across a room. Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez knew things that he should not know, facts about distant events that arrived in his mind like memories he had never made. And Vasquez herself. She could feel the whisper's presence at the edge of her consciousness, waiting, watching. Sometimes, when she was very tired or very stressed, she could hear its voice offering guidance. She never knew if the guidance was real or if she was simply going mad. 6 months after their return from the void, the situation reached a crisis point. A Concord Black Ops team attempted to abduct the crew of the Wandering Meridian. They came at night, using stealth technology to bypass the station's security systems. Their orders were to capture the humans alive and transport them to a secret facility where the Orthodoxy scientists could study them. The team was good. They were professionals who had been doing this kind of work for centuries. They knew how to move without being seen, how to neutralize targets without making noise, how to extract prisoners from secure locations. They failed completely. Rodriguez was the first to sense them coming. He woke from a deep sleep with absolute certainty that danger was approaching. He did not know how he knew. He simply knew. Within seconds, the entire crew was awake and alert. "They're in the ventilation system," Webb said, pointing at a section of wall that looked completely normal. 6 of them. "They have weapons that will put us to sleep if they hit us." "How do you know that?" asked Ensign Sarah Kim, one of the younger crew members. "I can see the energy signatures. They're using some kind of bioelectric disruptor. Very advanced. Very expensive." Webb tilted his head. "Also, the design is flawed. If I had a couple of hours and some basic tools, I could build a better version." Vasquez stepped forward. She felt the whisper stirring in the back of her mind, offering power if she wanted it. She hesitated. Using the whisper's gifts felt like crossing a line that she could never uncross. But her people were in danger. She reached for the power. When the Black Ops team burst through the ventilation cover, they found 47 humans standing in perfect formation, their eyes glowing with soft golden light. The team leader, a Vonkai warrior who had killed hundreds of beings in his long career, stopped dead in his tracks. "You will leave this station," Vasquez said. Her voice was her own, but there was something else underneath it. Something old. Something that had no patience for assassins and kidnappers. "You will return to whoever sent you and deliver a message." The team leader raised his weapon. "I have my orders. Stand down," and the weapon crumbled to dust in his hands. Vasquez had not moved. She had simply thought about the weapon ceasing to exist, and it had obeyed. She was as surprised as anyone, but she did not let it show. "The message is this," she continued. "We are not your enemy, but we will not be your prisoners. The choice of what we become next belongs to us. Anyone who tries to take that choice away will regret it." The team fled. They left behind equipment worth millions of credits and a reputation that had taken centuries to build. Within hours, every species on the station knew what had happened. The humans had stopped a Black Ops team without throwing a single punch. The galaxy's fear grew deeper. More threats came to Vasquez the next morning. The ancient being manifested in her quarters, its light flickering with what she had learned to recognize as distress. "What you did last night has changed everything," the entity said. "The Orthodoxy is demanding your immediate execution. The Pragmatists are defending you but losing support. The Ascendants want to use you as a weapon. Everyone is afraid." Vasquez sat heavily in a chair. She had not slept since the attack. The power she had used had left her feeling hollow and strange. "I didn't mean to do it," she said. "I just wanted to protect my crew." "I understand. But the galaxy does not. They see humans who can destroy weapons with their thoughts. They see a species that was unremarkable 6 months ago suddenly wielding power that rivals the elder races. They are terrified. What should I do? Moinfex was quiet for a long moment. Tell me truthfully, what is happening to you and your crew? Vasquez thought about lying. She thought about giving a comforting answer that would make everyone feel better. But she was too tired for lies. The whisper is changing us, she said, giving us pieces of itself. Knowledge, abilities, ways of understanding the universe that we never had before. We're becoming... I don't know what we're becoming. Something between human and architect, maybe. Something new. And can you control it? Sometimes. Not always. Last night I acted on instinct. If I had thought about what I was doing, I probably couldn't have done it. But when my people were in danger, the power just flowed. That is concerning, I know. The ancient being moved closer, its light dimming to a gentle glow. Elena, I have watched your species since before you learned to use fire. I have seen you grow from simple animals into space travelers in what feels like the blink of an eye. You are remarkable in your adaptability, in your willingness to change. But this transformation you are undergoing, it goes beyond anything I have seen before. Vasquez looked up. Are you afraid of us too? I am afraid for you, Morntex replied. The Whisper's gifts come with a price. The architects who received similar gifts eventually became something other than themselves. They gained great power, but lost touch with what made them who they were. I do not want to see that happen to humanity. How do we prevent it? By remembering who you are. By holding on to your humanity even as you become something more. By never letting the power become more important than the people you are trying to protect. Vasquez thought about this for a long time. The Whisper chose us because we never gave up, she said finally. Because we kept trying even when everything seemed hopeless. That stubbornness, that refusal to surrender, that's the core of who we are. As long as we hold on to that, I think we'll be okay. I hope you are right, Morntex said. For all our sakes. The political crisis continued to worsen over the following weeks. The Orthodoxy grew bolder in their attacks on humanity. They spread rumors that the humans were planning to conquer the galaxy. They claimed that the Whisper was an evil spirit that had possessed the crew of the Wandering Meridian. They called for war. The Pragmatists tried to maintain order, but their influence was fading. Every day, more species chose sides. Every day, the cracks in the Concord grew wider. Then the Ascendants did something unexpected. They invited the humans to join them. We are building a new alliance, Speaker Myris told Vasquez during a secret meeting. One that is not bound by the old hierarchies. The younger races are tired of being treated like children. We want to create something better. And we want you to be part of it. Vasquez studied the alien leader carefully. Myris was a member of the Collective, a species that shared consciousness across multiple bodies. The being before her was actually dozens of individuals thinking as one. Their offer seemed genuine, but she had learned to be cautious. What would that mean? She asked. Joining your alliance? It would mean standing together. Your abilities, our numbers, our resources. We could challenge the elder races. We could force them to share their knowledge, their technology. We could create a galaxy where every species is equal. And the threat? The absence that the Whisper warned us about? Myris hesitated. We believe it is real, but we also believe it is distant. We have 50 years to prepare. There is time to reshape the political order first. Vasquez shook her head slowly. You're making the same mistake everyone else is making. You're treating the warning as a problem for later. But the Whisper didn't give us 50 years because that's how long we have to argue. It gave us 50 years because that's how long we have to work. The work will go faster if we control the resources. No, The work will go faster if we stop fighting each other and start cooperating. I'm sorry, Speaker. I appreciate your offer, but I can't be part of a political revolution. My job is to help the galaxy survive, not to help one faction defeat another. Myris was silent for a long moment. You may regret this decision, Captain. The elder races will not welcome you no matter what you do. At least with us, you would have allies. I understand, but I have to do what I believe is right. The meeting ended poorly. The Ascendants did not become enemies, exactly, but they stopped being friendly. Vasquez found herself increasingly isolated, caught between factions that all wanted something from her that she was not willing to give. Her crew was struggling as well. The changes in their minds and bodies were accelerating. Some crew members developed abilities that they could not control. Others had visions that left them confused and frightened. A few wanted to embrace the transformation fully, to become whatever the Whisper was making them. Others wanted to resist, to hold on to their humanity at all costs. Rodriguez found Vasquez alone in the observation deck one night, staring out at the stars. He sat down beside her without speaking. They had known each other for years. Sometimes words were not necessary. The crew is fracturing, Vasquez said finally. Jacobs and Chun want to go deeper into the transformation. They think we should become as powerful as possible to fight the absence. Martinez and Kim want to find a way to remove the Whisper's gifts entirely. They're afraid of what we're becoming. What do you want? Rodriguez asked. Vasquez was quiet for a long time. I want to go back to New Valencia, she said. I want to sit on my parents' porch and drink coffee and pretend none of this ever happened. I want to be a normal person with normal problems. That's not an option anymore. No, it's not. She turned to look at her old friend. We're going to become something new, James. Something the galaxy has never seen before. I can feel it happening. The question is whether we become something that saves everyone or something that makes things worse. Do we get to choose? I think so. The Whisper shows us possibilities, but it doesn't force us down any particular path. We still have free will. We can still decide what kind of beings we want to be. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Then we choose to be the good guys. Simple as that. Despite everything, Vasquez smiled. Simple as that. It won't be easy. Nothing ever is. But that's okay. Easy is boring. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel past the station's windows. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between galaxies, the absence was moving toward them. Somewhere out there, the architects were sleeping, waiting to see if their creations would succeed where they had failed. And here, on a station full of arguing politicians and frightened aliens, a small group of humans was trying to figure out how to save everyone. The odds were terrible. The challenges were impossible. The enemy was beyond anything they could imagine. But they were going to try anyway, because that's what humans did. 2 years had passed since the wandering Meridian emerged from the void of Kethvar. 2 years of chaos, transformation, and desperate preparation. The galaxy was not the same place it had been before the humans brought their message. The Concord had not fallen, but it had changed beyond recognition. The old power structures were gone. The elder races no longer controlled everything. The younger species had risen to take their place alongside them. And at the center of this new order stood humanity, transformed into something that no one quite understood. Alana Vasquez, now Admiral Vasquez. Though she still hated the title, stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge. The first ship built using the knowledge that the Whisper had shared. It was larger than any human vessel before it, but still small compared to the warships of the elder races. Its hull was covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move. Symbols that channeled energies from dimensions that most species could not perceive. The ship was just one of hundreds that made up the United Fleet. Ships from every species in the galaxy, designed to work together in ways that would have been impossible 2 years ago. Keth-Mori cruisers flew beside human destroyers. Voronkai battleships shared formation with vessels from the Collective. Even the Synthesis, who had not built physical ships in millions of years, had contributed crafts made of pure energy and thought it was the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. And it still might not be enough. Rodriguez walked onto the bridge and stood beside Vasquez. He had changed as much as she had. His eyes held depths that no human eyes should possess. His mind worked on levels that he could not fully explain. But he was still the same person underneath. Still her friend. Still the steady presence she relied on when things got difficult. "The last ships have arrived," he reported. "We have 427 vessels from 308 species. Everyone who was willing to come is here. And the ones who weren't willing? The Orthodoxy remnants retreated to their core worlds. They've built defensive systems and closed their borders. They say they'll wait out the storm." Vasquez shook her head sadly. "They won't survive. The absence doesn't care about borders." "I know. We all know. They just can't accept it, or won't." The journey to reach this point had been long and painful. After the political crisis of the first year, Vasquez had made a decision that changed everything. Instead of joining any faction, she had offered to teach anyone who wanted to learn. The Whisper's knowledge was vast, covering technologies and sciences that the galaxy had never imagined. But it was not easy to understand. The architects had thought in ways that were fundamentally different from other species. Their concepts did not translate directly. Learning what they knew required changing how you thought about the universe. The elder races struggled the most. They had millennia of established knowledge that they had to unlearn before they could learn anything new. Many gave up in frustration. Many declared that the humans were lying about the difficulty. But some persevered. The younger species adapted more easily. They had less to unlearn. They were more willing to admit that they didn't know everything. Within months, engineers from a dozen different species were building new technologies based on architect principles. The human crew of the Wandering Meridian had become teachers. Each of them specialized in a different area based on the gifts the Whisper had given them. Webb taught engineering and physics. Sharma taught biology and medicine. Rodriguez taught strategy and tactics. Others taught navigation, communication, resource management, and 100 other skills. And Vasquez taught leadership. "The hardest thing about command isn't making decisions," she told her students from every species in the galaxy. "The hardest thing is making decisions when you don't have enough information. When the situation is chaos, when everything is going wrong. That's when leadership matters most. Anyone can give orders when things are going well. True leaders find a way forward when there is no obvious path." Her students came from species that had never trusted each other. Some had been enemies for millennia. But in the face of the coming darkness, old hatreds seemed small and petty. They learned to work together because the alternative was extinction. 2 years of teaching, building, and preparing. 2 years of political battles, scientific breakthroughs, and painful transformations. 2 years of watching the darkness at the edge of the galaxy grow closer, day by day, as the absence continued its slow advance toward them. Now the time for preparation was ending. The time for action had arrived. Long-range sensors had detected the absence 6 months ago. It appeared first as a shadow against the distant stars, a place where light simply vanished. As weeks passed, the shadow grew larger. Stars that had burned for billions of years went dark. Planets that had orbited those stars ceased to exist. An entire section of the galaxy was being erased, wiped away as if it had never been. The United Fleet had traveled to the edge of known space to meet the threat. Behind them were trillions of lives, the accumulated achievements of thousands of civilizations, everything that made the galaxy worth saving. Ahead of them was something that made even the architects afraid. Vasquez turned to address her bridge crew. They came from 7 different species. Some had bodies, some were energy beings, some existed partially in other dimensions. They were the strangest group of officers ever to serve on a ship together. "All stations report ready?" she asked. "Engineering ready," said Webb from his position at the technical console. He was surrounded by holographic displays showing the status of every system on the ship. "Medical ready," said Sharma from the station she had designed herself. "Capable of treating patients from any known species." "Tactical ready," said Rodriguez, his eyes flickering with data streams that only he could see. "Communications ready," said Ensign Kim, who had grown into one of the fleet's best signal officers. "Navigation ready," said a Voronkai officer named Beskver, great-grandchild of the warrior who had first challenged Vasquez's right to speak before the tribunal. One by one, the other stations reported. When the last confirmation came in, Vasquez felt a moment of pride that surprised her. 2 years ago, these species would never have worked together. Now, they functioned as a single unit, trusting each other with their lives. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Vasquez to all ships. You know why we're here. You know what we're facing. The absence is the enemy that destroyed the architects, the beings who created all life in this galaxy. It has been traveling toward us for billions of years, and now it has finally arrived." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not going to lie to you. We don't know if we can win. The architects were more powerful than we are, and they lost. Everything they built, everything they learned, wasn't enough to stop the absence. Maybe nothing will be." Another pause. "But we have something the architects didn't have. We have each other. 308 species from every corner of the galaxy, working together for the first time in history. Old enemies standing side by side. Former rivals fighting as allies. We are united in a way that the architects never were." She felt the whisper stirring in the back of her mind, adding its voice to hers in ways that the fleet would feel but not hear. The architects faced the darkness alone because they thought they were the only ones who could. They were wrong. Strength comes from unity. Courage comes from standing together. And hope. Hope comes from knowing that you're not alone in the fight. The fleet was listening. She could feel their attention, their fear, their determination. "I don't know if we can win," she repeated. "But I know we can try. We've always known how to try. And that's enough to start." She cut the channel and turned to her crew. "Move us forward. It's time to meet the enemy." The united fleet advanced toward the darkness. At close range, the absence was even more terrifying than the sensors had suggested. It was not merely dark. It was an emptiness so complete that looking at it hurt. The mind tried to fill in the blank space and found nothing to work with. Stars that should have been visible behind it simply weren't there. Space itself seemed to end at its border. Vasquez had studied everything the whisper could teach her about the absence. She knew that it wasn't alive in any normal sense. It didn't think or plan or feel. It was more like a natural force, a phenomenon that consumed everything it touched. The architects had compared it to a fire that burned not matter but reality itself. Fighting it with conventional weapons would be useless. You couldn't destroy something that was already nothing. You couldn't shoot at empty space. But the architects had learned something else in their long war against the absence. They had discovered that certain kinds of energy could slow its advance. Not stop it, not push it back, but slow it down. The right frequencies, the right patterns, the right combinations of force could make the nothing hesitate. The United Fleet was equipped with technology based on that discovery. Their weapons didn't fire bullets or energy beams. They projected fields of structured reality, walls of organized existence that the absence could not easily consume. Each ship was a node in a vast network, creating a barrier that stretched across light years of space. It was not a permanent solution. The barrier would weaken over time. The absence would eventually push through, but it might buy the galaxy centuries instead of years. Centuries to find a better answer. Centuries to grow stronger. Centuries to learn. The fleet reached the designated coordinates and began the formation. Ships spread out across the void, positioning themselves according to plans that had taken months to develop. Each vessel had a specific role to play. Each species contributed something unique. The Kethmori ships projected fields of temporal stability, slowing time around them to reduce the absence's rate of advance. The Voronkai battleships generated physical force, raw energy, that created pressure against the nothing. The synthesis beings wove structures of pure thought, patterns of consciousness that the absence seemed unable to absorb. And the human ships? The human ships did something that no one else could do. They improvised. The formation isn't working perfectly, Rodriguez reported, watching data streams that showed the barrier's effectiveness. The absence is finding weak points between the ships. It's adapting faster than we expected. Vasquez had known this would happen. The absence was not intelligent, but it was relentless. It probed constantly, testing every part of the barrier, flowing around obstacles like water around rocks. Any static defense would eventually fail. Tell the fleet to switch to dynamic formation, she ordered. Adjust positions based on where the pressure is strongest. Don't try to hold a fixed line. Move with the threat. The order went out. Some ships adjusted immediately. Others hesitated, uncertain about abandoning the careful plan they had practiced. Vasquez sent a second message. This is what we're good at. Adapting, changing, trying new things when old things don't work. The plan was a starting point, not a prison. Trust your instincts. Find what works. Slowly, the fleet began to move differently. Instead of holding rigid positions, ships flowed around each other, adjusting constantly to meet the absence's pressure. The formation became fluid, organic, alive in a way that formal military doctrine would never have allowed. And it was working. The weak points are stabilizing, Rodriguez reported, surprise in his voice. The barrier is holding better than before. It's messy, observed Deskver from navigation. There's no order to it. It shouldn't work. Messy is how humans fight, Vasquez replied with a small smile. We'll clean it up later. The battle continued for hours that felt like days. The absence pressed against the barrier constantly, never stopping, never resting. The fleet adjusted and readjusted, closing gaps that formed, strengthening sections that began to weaken. It was exhausting work, requiring constant attention from every ship. But they were doing it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they were holding the line. Then the whisper spoke. It came without warning, flooding through Vasquez's mind and spreading out to touch every member of the fleet. For a moment, millions of beings from hundreds of species shared a single consciousness. You have done well. The voice was vast and ancient, carrying weight that made words seem inadequate. The architects created you to grow and learn and become something more than they were. They hoped that someday their children would succeed where they had failed. For billions of years, that hope seemed foolish. The species of this galaxy fought each other, distrusted each other, refused to work together. Images flowed through the shared consciousness. Memories of wars and betrayals. Memories of missed opportunities and wasted potential. The long, sad history of the galaxy's divisions. But now you stand together. Different species, different cultures, different ways of thinking. You have learned what the architects could not teach themselves. That strength comes not from being the same, but from being different and working together anyway. Vasquez felt tears on her cheeks. She was not the only one. The barrier you have created will hold for now, but the absence will not stop. It will press and push and probe until it finds a way through. This is not the end of your struggle. It is the beginning. The voice grew stronger. However, you are not alone in this fight. The architects retreated because they believed they had failed. They hid in dimensions beyond your reach, sleeping through the ages, waiting for the end they thought was inevitable. But you have shown them something they had forgotten: hope, courage, the willingness to try even when failure seemed certain. And now they are waking up. The fleet felt something then, a presence at the edge of reality, vast beyond comprehension. Not one being but millions, the entire architect civilization stirring from a sleep that had lasted since before the stars were born. They are not coming to save you. That is not their way. They are coming to stand beside you, to fight alongside the children they created, the children who exceeded all their expectations. The battle for the galaxy is just beginning. There will be setbacks and losses. There will be moments of despair. But as long as you remember what brought you here, as long as you remember that together you are stronger than any of you are alone, there is hope. The presence began to fade. I have watched over this galaxy for longer than your species have existed. I have seen countless civilizations rise and fall. But I have never seen anything quite like what you have done here today. The whisper's final words echoed through every mind in the fleet. The test was never about survival. It was about finding someone willing to stand at the door. You are ready. And so, finally, are we? The presence withdrew. The shared consciousness dissolved. Every being returned to their own body, their own ship, their own thoughts. But something had changed. They had felt the architects, felt the vast power that was beginning to wake. They knew now that they were not fighting alone. The creators of all life in the galaxy were coming to stand with their creations. It would still be hard. The absence was vast and relentless. The war would last for centuries, maybe millennia. Many would fall. Many sacrifices would be required. But for the first time, victory seemed possible. Vasquez wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Around her, her crew was recovering from the experience, talking in excited whispers about what they had felt. "All ships," she said into the fleet communication channel. "The whisper has spoken. The architects are waking. But we don't wait for anyone to save us. We hold this line until relief arrives, and then we push forward. That's what we came here to do. That's what we're going to do." The fleet responded with affirmations from every ship. 308 species, speaking in hundreds of languages, all saying the same thing. "We are ready." Vasquez looked out at the darkness that covered half the sky. Somewhere beyond that darkness, the absence waited. Somewhere beyond that, the rest of the universe continued to exist, full of wonders that none of them had ever seen. They were going to see those wonders. They were going to push back the darkness and reclaim the stars that have been lost. Not because they were certain of victory, but because giving up was not an option. That was what humans had taught the galaxy. Not superior technology, not ancient wisdom, not overwhelming power. Just simple, stubborn refusal to surrender. The fleet held the line. The barrier stood strong. And in the void of Kethver, at the heart of the Forbidden Zone, lights began to appear where no lights had shone for 40,000 years. The architects were waking. The galaxy's darkest hour was also the dawn of its greatest age. And it had all started with one small human ship that refused to die in the dark.